Good morning. Welcome back to Daybreak on this 18th day of May 2021. My name is Sam Gituku, and you're just in time for that conversation around the latest and what's in informing public discourse. And I want to introduce the panel that we have in studio. We have Steve Ogola, who's an advocate of the High Court. Karibu sana to the show.
Asante sana.
We have Gladys Boss from Uasin Gishu. She's the woman representative there. Karibu sana.
Good morning. Thank you.
Dr. Pamela Odhiambo from Migori County. She's the woman representative there. Karibu sana.
Good morning, Kenya.
And very shortly we'll be joined by one Tim Wanyonyi, who is the Member of Parliament for Westlands. But before he does so, I want us to listen, because today there are two by-elections that are being conducted by the IEBC. The chairman, Wafula Chebukati, is on the ground in Juja constituency of Kiambu County, and he has said that they are desirous of appealing against the decision of the High Court that found that their actions of verified signatures were null and void because they didn't have the quorum, among other reasons. But first, let's listen to the judge as well as Wafula Chebukati, the chairman, as they spoke about this matter.
A declaration is hereby made that the administrative procedures for the verification of signatures in support of constitutional amendment referendum made by the IEBC are illegal, null and void because they were made without quorum, in the absence of legal authority, and in violation of Article 94 of the Constitution and Sections 5, 6, 11, and 11 of the Statutory Instruments Act.
In the course of this week, we shall be launching an appeal in the Court of Appeal. And it's for the simple reason. Sometimes in 2019, the High Court, presided over by Justice Okwanyi, made a determination that Article 250 of the Constitution is what applies to the Commission. Article 250 applies to all constitutional commissions and independent commissions.
All right, and of course he's talking about that the commission was, was constitutionally constituted, bearing in mind that it has a minimum of 3 commissioners, but now the judges are saying that the quorum as per the Act is 5. What do you make of this, Steve Ogola? And does it invalidate all the by-elections that IBC has conducted, including the few that it's conducting today?
No, it doesn't, because first of all, 2 things. The judgment does not apply retroactively, but secondly, although the judgment in totality is good, I think that is a valid point. I support that sentiment, but for a different reason, yeah? Mm-hmm. If you look at the Election Laws Amendment Act 2017 that were enacted sometime in September, just in the period between the nullification and then the fresh election, yeah? Mm-hmm. Parliament repealed paragraph 5 of the 2nd schedule to the IBC Act. Paragraph 5, the 2nd schedule, provides for quorum to be at 5. The repeal of that paragraph reduced the quorum to 3, from 5 to 3. There is a case where Justice Chacha Mwita, I think Katiba Institute versus the Attorney General and IBC, must be petition 548 of 2017. What Justice Chacha said, he declared that amendment to be unconstitutional. So here's the lacuna, yeah? You have a provision of law that has been repealed. Then the law that has repealed that provision has now been declared unconstitutional. So you remain with no law. Mm-hmm. So when you see the judges relying on paragraph 5 to the IBC, the 2nd schedule of the IBC Act, you see a problem there, a gap in appreciating that that amendment was already declared unconstitutional. So we cannot rely on paragraph 5 of the 2nd schedule of the IBC Act because that paragraph doesn't exist. What is supposed to happen is Kenya law is supposed to update the IBC Act, but they say they cannot update it until Parliament passes another act, another amendment statute that then corrects it. So the short answer is this. I think that's an arguable question. Mm-hmm. On the reading of the law. The Constitution, Article 250, Subarticle 1, provides that the composition of a constitutional commission shall range between 3 to 9. IBC Act put the composition of the commission at 7, and then set the quorum at 5. But the law that set the quorum at 5, I've already said, was amended by Parliament, and Mheshimiwa is here, they can confirm that, was amended by Parliament, then that amendment was subsequently declared unconstitutional. So when you amend, you take away. Then you introduce a new provision. If the new provision has been declared unconstitutional, you don't return what was repealed. You remain with no law. It's like ABC. You remove ABC to introduce DEF. If DEF is declared unconstitutional, then you start from G going forward. A, B, C, D, E, F remains a vacuum. So judges can't come and rely on ABC.
Is that so? I would have thought that once you declare it unconstitutional, then you revert to what was before the amendment. So now what happens, and what is your response to the clamor by ABC to appeal against this decision?
No, I think, you know, and I think so Gola has put it very well and articulated it very clearly. But you remember the reason why we go to court is when we think that our laws, when something is unclear about the law, you present it to the court, and then the court is able to interpret it. That's why we are a common law country. So we also rely, there is law that is made by Parliament, and then there is judge-made law, which is precedents and pronouncements and interpretations by the court. That is where you fall back on. And all common law countries do that. And so I always encourage that, I mean, and that's why our law keeps growing, and it's a very important thing. Hence the reason why we have to have law reports, because the law reports is to actually document the judge-made law. So in this case, what I think it's okay for IEBC to appeal if they want to, because then it gives us an opportunity for clarification. Yeah, sure. So people should not frown upon when people want appeals. Appeals keep on fine-tuning our law until we get to a point where the law is clear and precise and there is no lack of interpretation. Yeah, sure. And in fact, that point, which is a view that when a law is declared unconstitutional, you don't revert to the old law. Yes, then hopefully this time during the appeal, let that be pronounced so that it's not based on my opinion or Ogola's opinion or somebody else's opinion. Let it be based on a pronouncement by the court. So it's a very good point. I'm happy that there's going to be an appeal on it.
And Dr. Pamela Odhiambo, how much a bother is this? Because we know that Bonchari and Juja are going back to the polls on a day or a few days after that declaration by the court. The quorum should be 5. Should a by-election touch on the very core issues that the judges found would require 5 commissioners to make a determination?
It is very disturbing because, as my friend the lawyer puts it, we cannot operate in a vacuum. Unfortunately, it is said that the law or the judgment that the ruling that the judges made cannot apply retroactively, but it leaves a very serious open wound of negligence on somebody's part, because the amendments that he's talking about took place in 2017, and up to now, our judges, our lawyers, or whoever was concerned to have brought things to speed did not do it until now. So we have seen IBC doing things, and now there is this ongoing election after the ruling. So the question is, do we nullify this election? But you see, as Chebukati puts it, the Article 250 still gives them life to operate, because it says the composition is at 3, not really 5. So I think there is a need for serious clarification of things as they are, so that the different conflicting views from Parliament, from the judiciary, from the executive, stop confusing Kenyans.
Okay. Though one might argue that Parliament has that responsibility of legislating, so when that vacuum exists, you also have a stake on what you can do.
But Sam, the law keeps on changing.
The law keeps on changing, and the Parliament has a stake. But you see what step the Parliament took to repeal that section of the law. And then the judge nullified the same. That's why I'm saying somebody must have slept on the job. Something needed to be done to push Kenyans from that existence of a vacuum.
Back to that, so that there are people who say, did they sleep on the job or they slept at work? There is Laura Chengotieno is in Bonchari. She's been there, woke up very early to prepare for the coverage of the by-election. they're going back to the polls to elect the successor of Oro Oyoka, who died sometime last year. Good morning, Laura, and what can you tell us about the opening of polls? It's been about 51 minutes since the time appointed by IBC to start for people to start voting.
Yes, indeed, Sam. It's about 40 minutes since polling centers were officially opened here in Bochari constituency, as you have rightly mentioned, for the parliamentary by-election here in this area following the death of John Oro Oyoka in February. So we are at Rihanna polling center, which is expected, where two of the candidates are expected to be casting their vote later in the day. And we have witnessed long queues. We have been going around a number of polling stations, but then so far this is where we have found the longest queue. A huge turnout. You can see the line stretches all the way to the back, and there are two streams here for voting, and we have seen people show up in their numbers to come and cast their vote. And if I could just speak to one of them, anza na jina alafu niambie umerauka hapa kupiga kura, ulikuwa unatarajia vipi?
Mimi majina naitwa Douglas Okachi. Mimi mtu wa Bonjari, nimetoka kituo ya Rihanna Ward. Naona security iko sawa. Kila mtu akuja apige kura na aende nyumbani mzuri. Naona mambo iko sawa sawa. Wacha tupige kura, hakuna mtu anasuia mwingine asipige kura. Mimi nasuia, hakuna mtu anasuia mtu. Wacha kila mtu akuja apige kura na aende. Mimi natarajia kila mtu achague mwenye anapiga kura. Mimi nimetoka bodaboda kutoka Rihanna na ward ninachagua. Thank you very much.
Okay. Asante sana. And there are also a number of people who could just walk into one of the areas where people are voting. Of course, the exercise is going on smoothly. Sam, here is where the process starts from. There's one voter giving his ID for keying in his details into the KEMS. Yes, so this is how it's going on. Would you mind speaking to us? Tell us, how has the exercise been? Just start with your name.
I'm Richard. The exercise is okay, but I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of the commission. Yeah. Yes, but everything's well.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, of course, we will be keeping an eye on this, how the by-election unfolds. There are 103 polling stations across this constituency, with a total number of registered voters being 52,955. So, of course, later in the day, we'll be crisscrossing these places to see how the events turn out and and later move on to the tallying center for the final tally of the votes, Sam.
All right, thank you so much, Laura Otieno, of course, coming all the way from Bonchari constituency, where, as she says, 50,995 voters are expected at the polls to choose who will be their member of parliament until the expiry of the current legislature, or rather, the current parliament, the 12th parliament, which expires sometime in August. Before we return to the polls. And we are here talking about different matters on IABC. And now joining us is Honorable Tim Wanyonyi, who is from Westlands constituency. Good morning. And we've been talking about, it's not West T, it's Westlands. Someone is telling me it's West T. We've been talking about the situation to do with IABC. And if IABC goes back to court and they're able to get a favorable outcome, that indeed the quorum can actually be at 3, at the minimum of 3 as per Article 250. Would that in any way affect the finding on verification of signatures, or was the finding so damaging to the extent you cannot resuscitate it?
Thank you, Sam, for letting me in. I think there are two situations. We have the Constitution and then the legislation, the parliamentary legislation, which provides at 5. Quorum at 5, but the Constitution provides at 3. So if the two laws are in conflict, the Constitution definitely takes the precedence. So I believe even the court has given an advisory that the Constitution was properly constituted and they can transact business with a quorum of 3. So I believe that until that decision is actually reversed, then maybe we can talk about the crisis that is at the IABC. But also, you know, I don't know why we have taken so long to appoint the new commissioners. The other commissioners resigned almost 2 years ago, and the IABC has been running with a skeleton, you know, a bare minimum quorum at the IABC, and we have allowed it to go on. They have held several by-elections and have made several decisions that are far-reaching. So it will be a blame game if we continue at that line, but it's better that those positions are filled. Yeah.
Okay, of course, the process of recruitment is going on. The selection panel is awaiting applications for people who want to be commissioners. I don't know that Steve Ogolla is interested, but Honorable Boss, you wanted to tell us who slept on the job and why we are where we are, that upon, should I say, nullification of an amendment, then you haven't filled that gap. What do we do now?
Like Tim says that if there's a contravention, if there's a conflict, then this Constitution is supreme. But there is also a decision by the Supreme Court of Kenya where they came up with what they call the doctrine of necessity. So it was actually applying to the Supreme Court and other bodies where the Supreme Court said that if our quorum is supposed to be 5 and people have been, somebody asked for disqualification, which means the Supreme Court will not be hear the case, then the Supreme Court, unless there is acute bias or proof that there is going to be bias on any of the members, then the members can refuse to recluse themselves and continue to sit because of the doctrine of necessity. So I think you can even argue that same doctrine for the electoral commission, because what was supposed to happen to the electoral commission? Were we supposed to stop having by-elections? No. So the doctrine of necessity does apply in this case, if we were to make up an argument. But also to tell, and because I think if there's anyone who slept on the job, is the appointing authority of IBC commissioners, because there was nothing stopping anyone from appointing new commissioners, really. So that was the challenge.
How about correcting an anomaly in law that had already been mentioned by the court?
Yeah, okay, you know, there's different methodologies of making law. We have the Constitution, then we have legislation, then we have the subsidiary legislation, and then we have the judge-made law. So usually you can fall back on any of those laws, and that's why people go back to court for interpretations. Yeah, so there wasn't really a gap in that case.
No, the question I'm asking, if Parliament has enacted a review through the Elections Amendments Act of 2017, and then the court subsequently has said that this amendment was unconstitutional, then he says there is a gap.
Yeah, but
so
the gap is that...
What was the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee doing and the members of Parliament to fill that gap?
I think the issue, what happened is, no one felt there was a gap because there was already a constitution that provides for the quorum. So you can't say that there was absolutely no gap. But you know that there's been a back and forth at the Justice and Legal Affairs with Tim, I don't know if Tim is still sitting on the Justice and Legal Affairs, that usually what happens with amendments, it is usually the institution, either the Attorney General or IEBC itself that starts the process by roping in the AG and Kenya Law Reform Commission to bring that amendment. Yes, so you rarely do you find, unless it's a bill that is being pushed by a member of Parliament on the House, then it is left to state organs and state institutions who are concerned with those pieces of legislation and the ministers to bring to trigger the legislation to come to Parliament. So Parliament doesn't go and interrogate every government institution or every independent commission and say, oh, I think you have a gap in your law there and I think there's a gap in the law there. No, unless it is a private member who has decided to push it as a bill, yes. So that is how the lawmaking process happens.
All right, let's listen to something so that we see, because you said that doctrine of necessity would have enabled the by-elections to go on, but would it affect the following? Listen to the judge.
A permanent injunction be and is hereby issued restraining the IEBC from undertaking any processes required under Article 257.4 and 257.5 in respect of the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020.
So would it help? Any matters there?
I think let's create a distinction. When the High Court is barring IEBC from proceeding with the referendum, that is, the questions have been answered on the merit. It has nothing to do with composition of IEBC. That was a separate determination.
Yes. That
separate determination, I think there's an arguable point there on appeal, because you've said there's Justice Wilfredo Okwany in Isaiah Biwott case that said quorum is a moving target. If the commission is composed of 7, quorum is 5. If the commission is composed of 5, quorum can be 3. So that is a pronouncement by a court of coordinate jurisdiction. I don't think the High Court, they try to distinguish it, but I don't think they did a tidy job in that, because, as I already said initially, Parliament just needed to create another lawyer because they repealed the provision that the judges were relying on. And then now, then the court was trying to rely on that provision. They repealed the provision the court was relying on, created a new provision. The new provision was declared unconstitutional. The judges seem not to have been aware. But whatever the clip you're showing us speaks to a totally different thing, yeah? Talks about the legality, the constitutionality of the BBI process and the BBI content. I think on that issue alone, because a finding has been made that the entire process was flawed, and to that extent, I'm fully convicted, I support that judgment fully, I think IBC is not permitted to progress any further unless there is unless the respondents get a stay at the Court of Appeal, or now, as I've seen, they've gone back to the High Court unless they get a stay. So if you look at Article 257, Sub-Article 5, Sub-Article 6, all the way to Sub-Article 10, it talks about the procedure or the pathway to the referendum if Parliament approves. You get? And that is what the court is now stopping. That provision has nothing to do with composition.
Okay. Dr. Pamela Odhiambo, I want us to take a short break, but I return to this. But now, moving forward, because he says that even as IEBC is appealing against the question of quorum, it's not to help the verification of signatures, then what do you think needs to be done at a time that different parties are affected differently? What happens now?
I think I would go for the part of the argument my learned fellow here is taking. The determination we are hearing was concerning BBI. But now the composition, the constitution we have, is approving a minimum of 3 members of the IBC. And with that, it is possible that they can undertake activities and deliver services in the country. And so, going forward, I think those appeals need to be made on very many other clauses of that particular ruling. Because if they are just left like that, they are creating confusion. And you see, the way forward is, our country is to move on. We have to have these by-elections. Even the issue of the verification of the signatures. I mean, you don't have to have a multitude, really, to verify signatures. Even one person can do. But here's a case where we had 3. So what was wrong with the 3 verifying the signatures? Because I believe even if there were 9 of them or how many, most of the time how institutions work, not everybody sits there to do the job. It is delegated. You might find that is just 3 people who are overlooking at what is happening plus the rest of the secretariat. So I think the way forward is we need a little more clarification to move this country forward. Because what I see at play is the conflicting interests of the various parties. But Kenya and our common gains should be actually bigger than individual or group interests.
Dr. Pamela Odhiambo, the judge has said that a declaration is hereby made that at the time of the launch of the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 and the collection of endorsement signatures, there was no legislation governing the collection, presentation and verification of signatures, nor a legal framework to govern the conduct of referenda. And so it would appear it's bigger than the clerical work of looking at the signatures, but looking at either legislation or regulations that are guiding that process, and also the larger question of the quorum that you are saying that is appealable. But we'll get to that after the break. Text in your views via 22422 or tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is DAYBREAK. We'll get back on this and continue to understand the judgment that was delivered on Thursday last week by 5 judges upon hearing and determination of that matter.